The applause had barely settled when Camille lifted her glass, her smile painted for the cameras. "Before we begin," she said, "there is one last order of business." She looked straight at me. "Elise Hartwell, you are relieved of your position effective immediately. Security will escort you out." A hush moved through the ballroom, 300 guests in dresses, tuxedos, and curated admiration turning toward me like a single, blinking creature. My parents stayed frozen at their table. Richard stared at his water glass. Margaret smoothed her napkin. Trent grinned as if this had been rehearsed for his amusement. I stood slowly. No one stopped me. No one asked Camille what she thought she was doing. I unclipped my badge operations and compliance director and set it beside my untouched champagne. The stem made the faintest click against the table. Camille tilted her head. "We wish you well," she said, voice carrying the satisfaction of a curtain closing. I walked past their cameras, past the investors who suddenly discovered their shoes. A woman near the front whispered, "Is that her sister?" as if she could not believe humiliation could run in the family. Just before reaching the doors, I caught a glimpse of the giant screens looping the evening's program. Founding Family Representatives, the title read. Under it were only 2 portraits, Camille and Trent. My face had been removed entirely. The sting was sharp, but the pain was not new. Tonight was only the version done under chandeliers. I kept moving. I did not look back. And if you're someone who has ever been erased by the people who should have seen you most clearly stay close to these stories, I think you'll understand what comes next. I still remember the warehouse in Indianapolis, the year I was 22. Richard stood over a folding table, waving a contract he thought would change everything. $72,000 a year. "Elise," he said, already reaching for the next stack of paperwork. "Take it. It is more than fair." Camille leaned against a pallet of sealed cartons, twirling the new office keys Richard had just given her. "Dad is being generous," she added. "Some of us have to earn our way up." I studied the contract, then slid it back. "I want equity instead." Richard barely looked at me. "You need stability, not ownership." "I need a stake," I said. "Not a salary that disappears the moment someone decides I do not belong." Camille let out a short laugh. "You complicate everything. I contribute to everything," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Richard sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and gestured impatiently. "Fine. Give me whatever you drafted." I handed him a thin amendment barely half a page. He signed it without reading, distracted by a call buzzing on his phone and a deadline someone had just shouted across the warehouse. "That is it?" Camille asked. "She gets to hand you scrap paper and you just sign." Richard waved her off. "It is internal. It does not change anything important." But it did. He just did not know it yet. When we walked out together, Camille brushed past me, keys jingling like a warning. "You will never fit into the roles that actually matter," she whispered. I did not answer. I only tucked the signed amendment into my folder, knowing it would matter in ways none of them could see. And if you have ever held on to the smallest proof of your worth, you already understand the weight of that moment. The years that followed turned into a quiet pattern, each moment carving the same shape into my place in the family. When Trent joined the company, he misplaced an entire week of inventory reports. Richard did not scold him. He only looked at me. "Fix it. Elise, he is overwhelmed. Camille forgot a client call that jeopardized a contract worth well over $200,000. Margaret sighed and rubbed her shoulder. "She carries so much pressure. Be supportive." Every time something cracked, it was my hands filling the gaps. Every time something shined, it was their names engraved beneath it. One afternoon in 2016, during a board prep meeting, Richard shoved a thick packet of governance documents toward me. "Sort this out," he said. "Investors need it by tomorrow." I reviewed each page, noting how exposed the company would be if the wrong person gained authority. That night, I drafted a small amendment, simple language, hidden among dozens of routine updates, Section 12.7, Executive Overreach Trigger. The next morning, Richard skimmed a few lines before a senior lender called his phone. Without pausing, he signed every page. "Thank you." "Elise?" he muttered, already walking toward his office. Camille watched the scene unfold. "You always slip things in," she said under her breath. "Things that make you look indispensable." "I do things that keep this place from collapsing," I replied. She leaned closer. "And no one notices. That must sting." I held her stare, feeling the familiar burn of being dismissed and needed at the same time. When I placed the signed documents into the archive drawer, the weight of them settled differently. They were not leverage. Not yet. They were protection the family never realized they would need. And if you have ever built something quietly, knowing no one would thank you, then you already know how a moment like that stays with you. I arrived at the gala hours before the guests, hoping to slip in unnoticed. Staff hurried around me, adjusting place cards and testing microphones. A young technician stopped when he saw my badge. "Are you with catering?" he asked, puzzled. "No," I said. "Family." He nodded quickly, embarrassed, and moved on. I walked to the seating chart pinned beside the bar. Richard and Margaret were at table 3, Camille and Trent at table 1. My name appeared near the bottom of the list at table 18, under a cluster of strangers. A coordinator passing behind me said, "If any guests are uncertain, just seat them wherever, except for the head tables." Camille's voice floated across the room. "Everything needs to be perfect tonight. No surprises." Trent strolled up beside me, straightening his cufflinks. "This event is not really about you," he said lightly. "Do not make it awkward." I did not plan to. I answered. "You never plan to," he replied, smiling like he had delivered a clever insult. I turned toward the massive screens looping the evening's program. Under the title Founding Family Representatives, only 2 faces appeared, Camille and Trent. Years of small omissions suddenly aligned. I was not overlooked tonight. I had been removed long before I walked through the door. I stepped away from the chart, the decision settling quietly inside me. I left the hotel without a word, the echo of Camille's announcement still tightening in my chest. By the time I pulled into my garage, the rain had started a soft patter against the roof that made the silence feel heavier. I did not go inside. I set my bag on the workbench, opened my laptop on the hood of my car, and entered the passcode I had used for years. A folder waited at the center of the screen, Continuity Protocol. When it opened, every document I had ever filed, corrected, or quietly rescued shone back at me. Equity conversions, voting rights confirmations, compliance reports, bylaw amendments, and near the top, the line I had underlined a dozen times over the years, Section 12.7, Executive Overreach Trigger. Richard had signed it during a frantic review cycle in 2016, brushing off my explanation with a distracted wave. He never remembered signing it. Camille and Trent never noticed it existed. I clicked the interlinked windows one by one. Automated filings queued to the state business registry. Encrypted packets addressed to Samuel Whitford and the rest of the board. A timestamp marker confirming my voting interest, 52%. My phone buzzed once an incoming call from Margaret. I let it ring until it stopped. A second call from Richard. Then Trent. I muted the device entirely. The garage light hummed above me. I initiated the sequence. Filings sent, packets dispatched, emergency meeting trigger armed. A quiet steadiness rose in me, sharper than anger, cleaner than grief. I closed the last window and sat back. For 11 years, I had been the person who repaired what others broke. Tonight, for the first time, I was allowing the structure to correct itself, and the moment it did, the balance of our entire family would shift. By the time I stepped back into the Lexington Hotel, the gala had reached its polished peak. Laughter rolled across the room. The string quartet played its rehearsed harmony, and Camille posed with investors as if nothing in her world could fracture. Then phones began vibrating one table, then another. A man near the stage frowned at his screen. "Emergency shareholder meeting," he murmured. His wife leaned in, confused. Camille's smile wavered. "What is that?" she asked one of the coordinators. Before he could answer, security staff moved toward the exits with quiet precision, locking doors with a soft metallic click. No urgency, no shouting, just the unmistakable shift of a room being sealed. Trent stepped forward. "What is going on?" "This is a celebration." Samuel Whitford, the board chairman, stood at his table and spoke calmly. "The company has received legally filed notice of a governance trigger. Under our bylaws, an emergency meeting must convene immediately." Camille's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "This is my event. Whoever did this is getting fired." "You already attempted that," I said from the back of the room. Heads turned. A wave of silence followed me as I walked down the aisle. I set my laptop at the podium, and the projector behind me flickered to life. Across the massive screen, my amendment filled the room. Section 12.7, Executive Overreach Trigger activated upon the unauthorized termination of a majority shareholder. Richard's face drained. "Elise, what is this?" "Your signature," I replied. "From 2016. Camille shook her head. "You cannot do this. You cannot hijack my night." Samuel addressed her firmly. "This is not her decision. Ms. Hartwell, this is the law of the company." I opened the voting portal. "Motion to rescind the appointments of Camille Hartwell and Trent Hartwell," Samuel announced. Gasps spread like a ripple across the ballroom. The vote was about to begin. The voting portal opened with a soft chime, and the ballroom fell into a silence so complete it felt physical. Green and red options lit the enormous screen behind me. Every shareholder in the room held their phone as if it had turned to glass. Samuel's voice carried steady. "All voting members, please cast your vote now." The first numbers appeared almost instantly. 41% in favor. Camille let out a thin laugh. "Investors know what I have built. They are not siding with her." Another update flashed. 56%. A man near the stage whispered, "This cannot be real." Trent stepped toward the podium. "Elise, stop this. We are family." I kept my hands on the laptop. "You treated me like staff you could discard." "That is not true." He snapped. "You told me tonight was not about me. You made sure of it." His jaw tightened, and for the first time, fear cracked through his confidence. The numbers jumped again. 63%. Camille's voice broke. "Dad, say something. Do something." Richard looked at her, then at me, confusion flickering into realization. "I signed this, did I not?" "You signed all of it," I said quietly. Year after year. Corporate Counsel Jonathan Pierce rose from his seat. "For the record, all documents have been verified. Elise Hartwell holds majority voting interest. Section 12.7 is active, valid, and binding." Margaret gripped Richard's arm. "This is a misunderstanding. Elise would never hurt her own family." "Hurt," I repeated. "I held this company together when the two of you were chasing image and comfort." The numbers surged again. 67%. Camille lunged toward Samuel. "You cannot let this stand. This is harassment." Samuel held up a hand. "Your vote has already been cast. Ms. Hartwell." The final update arrived with a soft beep. 72% in favor. The entire bar on the screen turned green. A fork clattered against a plate. Someone gasped. The quartet stopped mid-measure. Samuel straightened. "The motion passes. Effective immediately. The appointments of Camille Hartwell as Chief Executive Officer and Trent Hartwell as Chief Operating Officer are rescinded." Camille trembled. "Elise, you blindsided us." I closed the voting page. "No, I protected what none of you cared to understand. Then I handed Samuel the transition addendum I had prepared years earlier. He read the first lines, nodded once, and addressed the room. The company enters new leadership tonight. The weight of the moment did not crush me. It finally aligned. 5 months later, the building felt different the moment I stepped inside. The tension that used to cling to every hallway was gone, replaced by something steadier. Linda Cho, our operations lead, met me outside my office. Vendor compliance numbers are up again. She said, "Your restructuring worked. It worked because everyone actually followed the process." I replied. She smiled. "It is easier when leadership does not change rules to protect egos." I did not comment. There was nothing left to say about the way things used to be. Inside my office, a simple brushed steel nameplate waited on the desk. Elise Hartwell, President and Chief Governance Officer. Samuel stopped by the open doorway. "Revenue is stabilizing. Investors trust the ship again." He paused. The family reached out. Several times. "My phone keeps those messages in a separate folder." I said, "I will read them one day. Only when you choose to," he replied. I nodded. Camille had sold her lake property in Asheville. Trent was tied up in a non-compete dispute. Richard and Margaret had moved quietly to Savannah. None of it changed the work in front of me. For the first time in years, the company was breathing evenly, and so was I. Near sunset, I stepped onto the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. Charlotte moved below me in its usual rhythm, steady and indifferent. I carried a slim folder under my arm, old notes from the warehouse days, early drafts of bylaws, copies of Camille's first promotions, Trent's earliest titles, pieces of a life I had carried alone. Samuel joined me a moment later, hands clasped behind his back. "You have rebuilt more than a company," he said. "You rebuilt the truth." I just stopped letting it be rewritten. I replied. He nodded toward the folder. "Going to archive it." "Yes," I said. "It belongs in the record, not on my shoulders." I placed the folder into the secure archive box by the door. No ceremony, no final declaration, just a quiet release. Samuel rested a hand on the railing. Foundations rarely get attention, but everything stands because of them. I felt the truth of it settle through me. "That is enough," I said. And if you have ever held up more than anyone realized, if you know the weight of being the quiet foundation, stay close. Stories like this have more to say, and I think you will want to hear the next one.